There is a form of self-mastery so rare that even strong men fall silent in its presence. And today you will discover the ancient code that transforms ordinary minds into relentlessly focused engines of unwavering discipline. Have you ever witnessed someone whose very existence seems to defy human limitation, who moves through chaos with the stillness of deep water, who faces adversity without the slightest tremor of doubt, while others crumble under pressure? They remain unbroken. While others negotiate with their weaknesses, they operate from a place beyond negotiation. And you know what people whisper about them? That person is different. That level of strength isn't natural. But what they don't understand is that this relentless consistency flows from an ancient Japanese principle that quietly dissolves the very concept of failure. It's called the Musashi Code. And once you understand how it reconstructs human identity, you'll never be the same person again. But there's a price. This system doesn't improve who you are. It removes everything that prevents who you could be. Before I reveal how this works, I need you to understand something. Comment below which aspect of your current self you're ready to dissolve. This helps me know you're serious about transformation. Let's begin. The story I'm about to tell you begins with a man named David, 34 years old, successful architect, devoted father of two. By every external measure, his life was working. But inside, he was fighting a war he couldn't win. Every morning brought the same internal battle. The alarm would sound at 5:30, and immediately his mind would begin its familiar routine. You're exhausted, sleep another hour. You can start tomorrow. This negotiation happened every single day. With exercise, with meditation, with reading, with every commitment he made to himself. Monday would arrive with fierce determination. Wednesday would bring the first mental bargaining. Friday would end in complete surrender. Sunday would carry promises about next week. This cycle had been running for 15 years. David tried everything modern psychology offered. Habit trackers, reward systems, accountability partners, productivity apps. Nothing worked because he was fighting something he couldn't see, the very framework of his identity. Until the day he discovered why samurai warriors could maintain discipline that seemed superhuman. And it had nothing to do with willpower. In the mountains of feudal Japan, there existed temples where young men underwent a transformation so complete that their families would mourn them as changed forever. These weren't ordinary monks. They were warrior scholars who understood something about human psychology that modern science is only now beginning to comprehend. The process was called identity dissolution and rebirth. When a samurai took his vows before the assembled community, he wasn't making a promise. He was performing a ritual surrender of his former self. The man who entered the temple ceased to exist. What emerged was someone entirely new. Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary swordsman who never lost a duel, wrote about this principle in his final work. He said the strongest warriors weren't those who fought their nature. They were those who had eliminated their weak nature entirely. David discovered this principle buried in an ancient text about Bushido philosophy. The concept seemed impossible at first. How do you simply stop being someone? How do you eliminate parts of yourself that have existed for decades? Then he read Musashi's explanation. Your mind categorizes every commitment as either negotiable or absolute. Negotiable commitments become daily battles. Absolute commitments simply exist. When a samurai declared himself a warrior in front of his community, he wasn't promising to try to be disciplined. He was announcing that the undisciplined version of himself no longer existed. The negotiation ended because there was no one left to negotiate. David decided to test this principle with something small. Instead of promising to meditate, he would declare himself a meditator. Instead of trying to wake up early, he would become someone who rises before dawn. The first step was what Musashi called the public declaration ritual. David wrote on paper, "I am a man who meditates for 20 minutes every morning at 5 a.m. for 90 consecutive days." He signed it. He photographed it. He posted it where everyone could see. His wife said he was being dramatic. His friends said he was trying too hard. Perfect. Every person who knew became fuel for his transformation. The first real test came on day 4. The alarm sounded at 5 a.m. and his mind immediately launched its assault. "You're being ridiculous. This isn't sustainable. One day won't matter." But something fundamental had shifted. The thought of publicly admitting failure after 4 days felt worse than getting up. The social declaration had made quitting more painful than continuing. His primitive brain, which had evolved to avoid social exile, now worked for him instead of against him. A Harvard neuroscientist studying identity formation explains this phenomenon. When you make behavior public, your brain interprets failure as a survival threat. Our ancestors who lost status in the tribe didn't thrive. Your nervous system still operates on this ancient programming, but David soon discovered that public accountability was only the beginning. Even with social pressure eliminating his ability to quit, he was still waging war every morning. His body didn't care about his reputation. It wanted to sleep when tired. The public declaration had ended the negotiation about whether, but his mind found new ground to fight on. When would he meditate? How long exactly? What type of meditation? Every small decision became a crack where his old patterns could leak back in. That's when he encountered Musashi's second principle, the way of no alternatives. Every samurai understood that the enemy attacks through indecision. The moment you create options, you create weakness. Musashi trained with the same sword, at the same time, in the same way, every single day. Not because variety was bad, but because consistency required eliminating every possible point of negotiation. David locked down everything. 5 a.m. exactly, 20 minutes exactly. Same cushion, same position, same breathing pattern. His mind screamed for variety. "This is boring. You're becoming a robot." Mix things up. But robots don't debate with themselves. They execute. By week 3, his body began to anticipate the routine. He would wake 2 minutes before his alarm. By week 5, he was sitting in meditation position before his conscious mind fully engaged. The practice was beginning to take care of itself. On day 37, David caught the flu. On day 42, he traveled for work. This is where every previous attempt had collapsed. Sickness equals rest day. Travel equals exception. Perfect conditions don't exist, so perfect practice becomes impossible. But Musashi understood something about gaps that changes everything. He wrote that practice must continue without even a moment of interruption, because in that gap, all your old patterns return. What saved David was understanding that practice doesn't require perfection. It requires continuity. Sick day meant 5 minutes instead of 20. Travel day meant meditation in the airport. Low energy meant sitting in silence without formal technique. The river never stops flowing. During drought, it becomes a trickle, but it never stops. The moment it stops, it's no longer a river. It's a memory of where water used to flow. Your practice is the same. The moment you create a gap, you're no longer practicing. You're someone who once practiced. Day 40 arrived with a family emergency. Day 53 brought unexpected overtime at work. Day 61 was his daughter's birthday party. Each obstacle that would have previously ended everything became simply another opportunity to prove that his new identity was unbreakable. People started to notice something different. You seem more present. You don't get rattled anymore. What's changed about you? The answer was simple. He was no longer someone trying to be disciplined. He had become someone who could not abandon his discipline. But the real test came when David faced obstacles he hadn't planned for. His meditation cushion was lost during a move. The house was being renovated, and there was no quiet space. His usual time was disrupted by a schedule change at work. These unexpected challenges used to destroy his consistency because he would have to make decisions under stress. In that moment of chaos, he would always choose the path of least resistance. That's when he discovered what samurai called predetermined responses. Ancient warriors didn't make tactical decisions during battle. The responses were already embedded in their training. When X happens, I do Y. No thinking, no hesitation, just execution. David wrote down every possible obstacle and pre-solved each one. No cushion means meditation on a folded towel. No quiet space means silent meditation in the bathroom. Schedule change means adjusting the time, but never missing the day. Construction noise means focusing on sound as the meditation object. Each scenario had its predetermined response. When obstacles arose, there was no decision to make. The answer already existed. A Yale University researcher studying decision-making under stress found that when you predetermine your actions, you eliminate decision fatigue from critical moments. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for willpower, remains intact to execute rather than decide. This is why David's practice became unshakable. He wasn't relying on willpower to overcome obstacles. He was relying on systems that required no negotiation. By day 90, something extraordinary had occurred. David was no longer the same person, not in a metaphorical sense, but in a literal, neurological sense. His brain had rewired itself around the new identity. The morning routine happened automatically, like breathing or heartbeat. He would sometimes complete his meditation before fully realizing he had started. When people asked about his discipline, he would genuinely not understand the question. Discipline implies effort. This required no effort. It was simply who he was. MIT researchers studying habit automation explain this phenomenon. When you repeat an action in identical context for approximately 66 days, the basal ganglia take over. The behavior becomes automatic. You're no longer deciding to do it. You're simply being the person who does it. But the transformation went deeper than routine. David's entire relationship with difficulty had changed. Problems that used to create anxiety now created calm focus. Challenges that used to overwhelm him now felt like puzzles to solve. He had developed what Musashi called the unmoving mind, a mind that stays still when the world doesn't. His family noticed it first. You don't react to stress anymore. You seem like you're made of different material. His colleagues saw it next. Nothing seems to shake you. How do you stay so calm under pressure? The answer was that he had replaced the mind that used to shake. Through 90 days of absolute consistency, he had dissolved his reactive identity and rebuilt something unbreakable in its place. This is what the ancient warriors understood. Strength isn't about overcoming your nature. It's about reconstructing your nature so completely that weakness no longer exists within you. But David's transformation faced its ultimate test 6 months later when his father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Everything that had seemed stable crumbled overnight. Hospital visits replaced morning routines. Sleepless nights monitoring breathing replaced consistent sleep schedules. The careful structure he had built was shattered by circumstances beyond his control. This is where most people return to their old patterns. Crisis becomes the excuse that undoes years of progress. But David had unknowingly prepared for this moment through something Musashi called forging in the fire. The legendary warrior deliberately trained in harsh conditions because he understood that true strength reveals itself only when everything else falls apart. Ancient samurai would practice in rain, snow, darkness, and exhaustion, not because they enjoyed hardship, but because comfort is where discipline dies. When your practice can only survive in ideal conditions, it isn't practice at all. It's performance art. David found himself meditating in hospital waiting rooms while machines beeped around him. He maintained his awareness while holding his father's hand through chemotherapy sessions. He discovered that the unmoving mind he had cultivated wasn't dependent on external silence. It was a quality of consciousness that traveled with him into uncertainty. A Stanford University researcher studying resilience in extreme conditions found that individuals who maintained core practices during crisis actually emerged psychologically stronger than before. The brain interprets successful navigation of chaos as evidence of unshakable capability. This is why warriors were forged through hardship rather than comfort. As David's father's condition worsened, something profound occurred in his internal landscape. The voice that used to negotiate with every commitment had grown completely quiet. Not suppressed or controlled, but simply absent. He would rise at 5 a.m. to meditate before driving to the hospital without any internal discussion about whether he should or shouldn't. He would maintain his awareness practices while dealing with insurance companies and medical bureaucracy without considering alternatives. The negotiating mind that had plagued him for 34 years had been systematically removed through months of consistency. This is what Musashi meant when he wrote about achieving no mind in combat. The warrior doesn't think about technique during battle. He becomes the technique. The separation between practitioner and practice dissolves completely. David had reached what ancient texts call the stage of effortless effort. His discipline no longer required willpower because there was no part of him left to resist it. Neurological scans of long-term meditators reveal something remarkable. The brain regions associated with self-control and decision-making show decreased activation during practice, while areas linked to automatic processing become dominant. What begins as forced behavior eventually becomes involuntary function, like breathing or heartbeat. David's transformation began affecting everyone around him in ways no one expected. His wife noticed she had started waking earlier without setting an alarm. His children began completing homework before being asked. His colleagues found themselves more focused during meetings when he was present. This phenomenon puzzled him until he discovered something researchers call behavioral contagion. When someone operates from a place of absolute consistency, their nervous system broadcasts a frequency of stability that others unconsciously attune to. It's not what they say or do deliberately. It's the quality of presence they embody. Ancient temples understood this principle. They placed their most disciplined practitioners in positions where younger students would absorb their state, not through instruction, but through exposure. The stable mind creates stability in its environment through resonance rather than effort. David's father, despite his illness, began commenting on a sense of peace he felt during their time together. Nurses mentioned that David's presence seemed to calm not just his father, but the entire ward. This wasn't intention or technique. This was the natural radiation of an unshakable internal state. When your inner world stops fluctuating, you become an anchor point for everyone around you. They feel safer, more grounded, more capable of accessing their own strength. This is why ancient warriors were revered not just for combat skill, but for their ability to bring order to turmoil through stillness alone. 3 years have passed since David began his journey, and his father has been gone for 18 months. But something remarkable emerged from that crucible of loss. David discovered that the Musashi Code had prepared him not just for discipline, but for the deepest challenges human existence can offer. When grief threatened to shatter his identity, he found that his practice had become so deeply embedded that it sustained him without conscious effort. The morning meditation happened even when tears fell. The unmoving mind remained stable even as his heart broke. This is what Miyamoto Musashi understood in his final years. The ultimate measure of any system isn't how it performs in ideal conditions. It's whether it can carry you through collapse and rebuild you stronger. Today, when people ask David about his discipline, they're really asking about something else. They sense a quality in him that feels almost supernatural, a presence that doesn't waver regardless of circumstance. What they don't understand is that this level of mental strength isn't about becoming more than human. It's about becoming fully human by releasing everything that was never you. The reactive mind, the bargaining self, the identity built from habits rather than truth. Through the ancient process of dissolution and rebirth, David discovered what the samurai always knew. Your true nature is already unbreakable. You simply have to remove what covers it. The Musashi Code doesn't create strength. It reveals the strength that was always there, waiting beneath layers of compromise and conditioning. When you commit to this path of absolute consistency, you're not building something new. You're excavating something ancient. And once that excavation is complete, you become powerful in the most beautiful way, not because you overpower others, but because your existence makes limitation look optional. Your discipline will unsettle the undisciplined. Your presence will become undeniable. People may say you're not normal, and they'll be right. You'll have stepped beyond normal into something rarer, something steadier, something true. The question that remains is simple. What identity will you publicly declare today? What part of yourself are you ready to dissolve? Because once you enter this path, there is no return to who you were, only the quiet, stunning arrival of who you were meant to be. Now it's your turn to step onto the path. In the comments below, declare the identity you choose to embody from this day forward. Not a goal, not a plan, an identity. Who do you become when hesitation ends? Write it, seal it, and let this be the first step of your own unbreakable self.